WildFlower Chef Susie, and today I am so excited to bring you one of my very favorite all-time and very unique recipes, one I haven't yet found anywhere, and we call it date bread pudding. It's something that my grandmother made every single Thanksgiving and Christmas when I went to see them in Nebraska. And this I served at the WildFlower Cafe. It was our most popular dessert. But I'm going to show you how to make it today. It's a great, easy recipe and just wows people. It's so delicious. What I do is I save the ends of my baguettes and my loaves of bread, and I cut those up and I use those for the bread pudding. So what I've done is I've just taken a baguette and I've cubed it and sort of pushed it into the 1 cup. It's an imprecise measure for the bread pudding. It's as long as you're within the ballpark of 1 cup, you're just fine. Then we have 1 cup of sugar. We have 1 cup of milk. We have 1/2 cup of melted butter. I have 1 egg in this recipe. And then I just combine these ingredients. It calls for 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/2 teaspoon of ground cloves. And the cloves really are the secret ingredient to this thing. Then we have chopped dates. Now with these dates, I just took regular, nice succulent dates, and I cut them with scissors, kind of taking the pits out at the same time. But sometimes in the bulk section of the food store, you find these little, what look like little date pellets. They're really hard little pellets. Those work great in this recipe because this stuff is going to steam on the stove for about 3 hours, and those little date pellets just get soft and blend right into it really well. And then you want 1/2 cup of nuts. I'm using chopped walnuts. Then for my instruments, I'm going to have 2 bowls. I'm going to have a bowl where I'm going to put the bread and the dates in, and then I'm going to whip up the eggs and the milk and the spices and everything else. Whip those up really well, add them to the dry ingredients, and then we're going to put them in a double boiler. And these are made so that you put a little bit of water in the bottom of the pan, like I have here, and not enough to touch the bottom of the pan. And then I'm going to put all the ingredients in here. I'm going to put on the lid, and then we're going to cook the pudding that way. Now another thing I found was I found a universal double boiler, and this fits many different sizes of pans. So you can use any old pan you want, put it in there, and as long as you can find a lid that fits it, you can improvise with this universal double boiler. Either way it'll work. So let's throw this together and make our date bread pudding. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take the dates and the bread, and we just put them in the larger of the 2 bowls. Just throw them in there. Now if the dates tend to clump too much for you, then you can toss these in a little bit of flour and it'll separate them. I'm going to kind of separate them as we go along, and then when I mix this together, I'll make sure that they're well incorporated. So we're adding the dates together in the 1 larger bowl. Now for the second bowl, we're going to pretty much just add everything else. We'll start with the egg, and we'll make sure the egg is whipped a little bit, slightly beaten. When a recipe calls for a slightly beaten egg, all you really need to do is incorporate things a little bit. If it wants it really well beaten, then you would just go further with it until it's emulsified. But this is just fine, just for blending it. Then we will add the milk. Add the sugar, stir those together. Then we're going to throw in the spices and the baking soda are in here. We bring the butter. It's really this easy. It's great. It's a wonderful recipe. And let's throw the nuts in with those dry ingredients too, since we're just keeping those dry. So we add this beaten mixture to these guys. I'll take a spoon and blend all this together. I'm going to simmer it for 3 hours. And I'm going to watch the water level periodically to make sure there's still water in the bottom of the pan. But with this pan, this is very tight, so it does prevent a lot of evaporation. And we'll look at it when it's finished. While that's cooking, we can make the sauce for the date bread pudding. So in a saucepan, we are going to put 2 cups of packed brown sugar. For you beginner cooks, just so you know that if a recipe calls for brown sugar, it always means that you want to pack it tightly into the measuring cup. It's a standard recipe, it's a standard thing in the cooking industry that you use packed brown sugar. So I have 2 cups of brown sugar, and I've got 1 tablespoon of flour. This will help to thicken the sauce a little bit. And I have 4 tablespoons of butter. 4 tablespoons of butter is a half of a stick, and we'll add that in there. And then lastly, we add 1/2 cup of Okay, I've let this come to a rolling boil for 1 minute, and I'm going to now take it off the stove. And we are going to experiment with the amount of apple cider vinegar we want to put. We have now the equivalent of 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar in there. And I think for most of you that'll be perfect. The vinegar is definitely there. It's a really nice sweet and sour balance. But I really like it a little more tart, so I personally am going to add 1 more tablespoon. So I'll have the equivalent of 1/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon in this. I'm getting a really strong nose hit off of the vinegar. Oh yeah, that's how I like it. It kind of really makes the mouth water, and it's really in there. So that's where I'm going to stop. Yeah. All right, now our time has passed. We've let this go for about 3 hours, and I'm taking the lid off and showing you how beautiful this pudding is. It's puffed up. You can see that in parts of it, it's boiled a little bit. And in my particular pan, I think because it's so tightly fitted, I've lost hardly any water from this. I did not have to add any water to this in the 3 hours that this cooked. So it cooked beautifully gently. Now this pudding is hot and fresh and ready to go. If you don't want to eat this right away, you can put it in the refrigerator and then heat it in the microwave. Now this is extremely rich. You really are going to want to eat several cups of this, but you really can't because it's just extremely rich. We're going to now drizzle some of this sauce over the pudding for serving. Just a little bit. You just want to drizzle it around nicely. Wipe off your dish so we have a nice presentation. Bring it back. Now I would normally top this with whipping cream. That's the traditional way to do it. But to save a few calories, maybe add a little bit of nutrition, I'm going to put a really amazing yogurt I've discovered on this. It's called Greek Gods yogurt. This stuff is so beautifully rich and wonderful that it really does taste like whipping cream, but it has a little less of the fat content, and it's just a beautiful yogurt. Let's try this. What I consider my most special recipe. It's absolutely wonderful, and I hope that you'll get up right now, go buy dates, and cut up some old bread that you have and make it, because you won't believe how delicious this is. Thanks so much for watching. Yeah. That's the best.